Good morning. My name's Tom. I'm alcoholic. You know, but I want to comment one about 48 years. The point is, if I can do it, so can you. I remember one of the first things I remember from my early sobriety is somebody getting a 10-year medallion. It seemed like forever to me, but it occurred to me, if he could do it, I could do it too. And so we're here to inspire each other in part. Okay, now, as far as Keith goes, uh, one of the things that people comment to me occasionally is unfortunately, a lot of people come in and not everybody stays, and so they come in and leave and go out and come back in, and a lot of times the comment I get is, "God, you're still here." It's true, I am. And Keith, we first met a number of years ago. He was living down a Bitterroot and came to town for a while, and I sponsored him for a while, and then he disappeared. So I admittedly forgot him, and then he came back a year or two ago, and we got reacquainted, and he's been participating. He's a solid member of the Soul Perspectives group, which I'm a part of, as well as several other meetings in town. And so he's got an interesting story, and I look forward to welcoming Keith.
Hello, my name is Keith Rich, and by the grace of the God and the fellowship that I've been able to find in this meeting, I've not had to have a drink or drug since February 12th of 2002. Yeah. So I don't know. I can't really go all the way back to do this whole drunk log because I started young. So I'll start when I was young. I didn't start with alcohol. When I was about 7 years old, I was living with an abusive stepdad who would literally close fist punch kids. And I was the primary target for that, I remember. And my uncle was involved in a racket where they would bring narcotics into the country. And he introduced me to this white powder in a little pill vial. I was already smoking because that was the cool thing to do. And he's like, yeah, just lick the tip of your cigarette, put that in there, smoke that cigarette. And then when your dad hits you, it won't hurt. And I got strung out really bad. My first experience with drinking was when I was 13. I had went to deliver some of this substance to a college party, and I was a little bit taller than most kids, but I went into that party, and the kids thought it would be funny to introduce me to alcohol. About a week later, I ended up in the court system being forced to go to my first AA meeting because in the process of that party, I blacked out and got a 19-year-old girl pregnant. Don't remember any of it. And I stayed away from alcohol for a long time because that shit scared me because, when you wake up and don't know what you did the day before at all and end up in the court system, the problem is once you're in the court system, you're in and out. So before I was 19, I probably went to almost 20 treatment centers. And my 19th year was pretty significant for me because I had 2 associate's degrees from college before I graduated from high school. And my band was like one of the most popular bands in the area. And we had, so my call to fame in Berkeley, California was we beat Green Day at the Battle of the Bands 2 years in a row. And yeah, so we were up and coming. Well, my uncle went to prison and big RICO case. So everybody in my family was gone. And I narrowly escaped getting involved with all that. But what happened was what I didn't account for was there was this big drug war going on in California, and my friend and I had bought some shit off of a guy, and we both OD'd. And I went to a treatment center. We ended up at the same treatment center. I got out, and, uh, did this treatment thing and, spin dry is what I call them, get out. And, of course the stuff sitting there on the coffee table, and it's like, I'm not going to let that shit go to waste. We paid $160 for it, and ended up ODing again and in the treatment center. My friend Snake, uh, got out of the treatment center, did the exact same thing I did, but there was no one there to help him. So he died. And, therefore we broke up the band. We had a big earthquake and I left. And, I never touched heroin again after that. So I thought I was doing good. And, I got a job. I landed a job at RSCCI International. And, it was when he was first starting up the business. And, I went to college. My associate's degree under Anton Cerf was advanced technical computer programming, and then my second one was advanced technical computer operations. So I specialized in Fortran programming to stop the Y2K compliance problems that we were going to be having. And, I remember going to my first job. I had tattoos on my hands and, long hair tied in a ponytail, and I'm on an airplane. And I'm just shaking. Um, you know, I had only been like 3 or 4 months clean, so I wasn't doing too good. And, I was just shaking on this airplane, and this guy pulls a bottle of, and I remember it to this day, like envisioned in my head, Johnny Walker Red Label. Hands it to me, and he goes, "This will stop those shakes." And I sipped it, sipped a little bit more, hated the taste at that time, and was like, wow, everything went normal for a minute. And normal was what I'd always been chasing. So I decided to finish that off and get out of the airplane, and landed a $2.6 million contract from my boss where I got 20% of it. Straight up, I remember going to the meeting, and I remember Las Vegas at the time. They did not let me buy at most liquor stores, but I could usually go in and say, I got a Wyoming driver's license, it's 18 to purchase. And I was able to acquire alcohol, stay drunk until I got back, was able to finish that up. And I do not remember a day without alcohol of some way, shape, or form in my pocket, in my desk, behind the toilet. You don't want to go in the toilet, Hank, because that's where your girlfriend looks. But, everywhere. I just lived with alcohol, and, it at first it kept me feeling normal. I was able to do things I couldn't do. I was able to face people. I was able to drive, something that I was probably not so proud of at this day, but I didn't have those blackouts again for a while. Um, and, I did pretty good for quite a while. But the problem is my drinking did get out of hand really quick. I remember, uh, I literally could have been killed, when I went overseas. We went on a vacation. My friends and I saved up money for some months, and we went to Egypt. Thought it would be a really good idea. And walking down the street, and there's a street vendor with a whole bunch of, bottles of Stola Canaya Black Label, which is $360 a bottle here in the United States 30 years ago. And that was my favorite because it just so smooth. I just remembered it. You just had to pour it about that much out of the top and add some water, because there's a warning on it that says denatured, not for human consumption, 99.9%. And the reason why they put that warning on there is it's more like, we dare you, but it has to be mixed with just enough water so your throat doesn't bleed while swallowing it. And the guy only wanted $1 a bottle for it, so I bought the case and a half he had. And then I got called because the United States had gotten a war with a country, and I was supposed to install some computer systems at the embassy in that country. So before we were actually going to active war, they threw me on a hop and flew me to Baghdad, and I had a case and a half of vodka. If you're caught with, at the time, if you were caught with alcohol in Baghdad, it was the death penalty. I didn't know. And the people that were there to protect me, my security contingent, were like, we have to get you to the fucking embassy now. And I didn't know clue. And I'm drunk, falling off stuff, and, get there, and I find out after I got backstage side that I could have been put to death if I would have got caught with that. And I was like, well, bummer. And, of course, everything happened and my life just went wham, crash. And I'll start with September 11th because everyone remembers that day. I remember where I was that day. My company had just built our main center in, because I had actually, the company kind of broke up because, you get an alcoholic and a meth head running a big corporation, you kind of don't do very well. And we weren't doing very well for a little while, but we had this whole new vision. My boss, who I called my boss, was in prison for printing his own cash, which they looked down upon. And we had been purchased by another company that was going to bring us back up, and I was on board as the head. So I was literally looking at doing something with my life, and we based our national headquarters in the Twin Towers. So I had taken a week off of work in order to have some fun with my family because I had just had a child with my fiance, who I love very much. And we were out in the desert, splunking around. And when we found out about what happened to the airplanes and like 15 of my really close friends. And I got a severance package because the company went bankrupt at that point. There was no recovery. And I got a little bit of money that didn't come through. But the thing is she got tired of my drinking. And me trying to stop drinking, which included me mixing, if you can't drink to where someone can smell something on your breath, what's the best thing to do? Chemical stew. And so what I was doing is I was mixing Seroquel with painkillers and vodka because my breath didn't smell as bad. So they didn't know how much I was drinking, but I still got the effect I wanted. And she left. When she left, I, of course, sold everything I owned, my house, my cars, and followed her to her parents' house. And with all I had really was a debit card. I didn't even have a car, which was kind of dumb, but ended up in Worland, Wyoming. And she wanted nothing to do with me at that point. And I didn't get it through my head. And she left, and I was stuck there with myself. So I was like, man, the guy at the local bar was pretty cool. I remember spending Thanksgiving with him and his family and a whole bunch of alcoholics that drank just like me. And we sat around and partied. And the next thing I know, I woke up in another town. I had no clue where I was, how I got there, what had happened. And I was with some lady, then I was helping her fix her car. And the next thing I know, she gives me the car, and I woke up in a hospital in Billings, Montana. Realized I started in Wyoming, and I woke up in a hospital in Billings, Montana, and I heard the nurse outside going, "I sure hope the guy that got hit by that drunk driver makes it." And I'm sitting there shaking, thinking the last I remembered was being on the wheel, behind the wheel of a car driving down the highway, and with a fifth of diesel. You guys don't have that in Montana, but this is the 98 proof stuff, fifth of diesel vodka right next to me and a fifth of Black Death that I had just finished underneath the seat. That was the last thing I remember before I blacked out. And I got scared. I got up. I found my pants. I couldn't find my shirt. So I took one of those nightgowns that they have at the hospital and I put one on frontward, one on backward, shoved it in my pants and booked it out of there. And the next thing I had to deal with that I started having the DTs. So I ran into some homeless guy who I was able to go to an ATM machine, get out some money, give him some money and say, I need something to drink. And he went down to the store and bought a whole bunch of Marcino cherries and vanilla extract or some shit. And I was like, this was going to get me through the night, but I need a jacket. So he sold me a jacket. I got on a bus, ended up in Gillette, Wyoming, and ran into some girl at some party, and she took me to an AA meeting. And then the next thing I know, I'm jetting out of town. And the next thing I know, I wake up in Casper, Wyoming, in the first part of December with an empty ATM card, the clothes on my back, and a really bad case of the shakes. So my first step was to get rid of the faces at stake. So I hung out with some homeless guys underneath a bridge, and they were drinking Sterno in a 5-gallon bucket of water. And I was like, I got to stop the shake. So I joined them. And the next day, I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the smart thing because sterno will kill you, right? I'm going to jump in at the dumpster behind the bar. And what I used to do is take out the trash bags that they had for the day that they had. And I would take the last few drops out of each one of those fifths and liters and whatever was in there and fill up a liter of chew. And that's what I used to drink. Um, Beer was too weak, just made me puke anyway, so I couldn't deal with it. Um, and I remember doing that for a couple days, but I still couldn't shop the shakes all the way. So I decided I went to an NA meeting and there was a whole bunch of new people there. And I started asking, hey, do you know any dealers? Do you know any dealers? Do you know any dealers? And finally, someone gave me a guy's phone number. I called this guy up, and on my way over to physically rob him, I accidentally fired off my last round. So I thought it would be a good idea to just make it look like there was bullets in a revolver, right? And I walked up to this guy's house, knocked on his door, put a gun to his head and robbed him because I needed the drugs that he had in order to be able to make it through. And it was just a couple days after that, I woke up and it's the middle of a snowstorm in December in Wyoming, Casper. No clue where I was. I didn't even know it was Casper at the time. And I slipped and fell in the snow and landed on the street corner, and I could feel both bottles break. And it was 5 a.m. There was not enough time for me to go to the bars and get alcohol. I had no money. I had nothing. And I just decided I'm going to die right here. This is where I'm at. It's because I know I went to, when I served for a company I worked for, was medic training. And I just know that hyperthermia sets in, everything's kind of mellow. And that's, from there, death is pretty easy. And in the middle of, 60 below winter, I wouldn't have that much time at all. And I just kind of proceeded to try to go to sleep. And the next thing I know, some jackass pulls up next to me and rolls me over and, are you okay? And I'm like, no. And he's like, you reek. It's like, yeah, and he throws me in his car and we drive down around the corner and bam, he brings me in and helps me to a chair. And the AA group there has been there for a long time. They got some old cool guys and they had a liquor cabinet in the back of the AA meeting for people that were detoxing. And he proceeded to get the guy to get the key. And they opened it up and gave me some vodka and had me sit there through the meeting. And then an AA member who I didn't know, she passed away a long time ago, but she was a nurse. I didn't know that, but she just offered me, you need to clean up. So this guy that let me in his car, I'm literally covered with vomit, feces, and urine because I'd been strung out for like 14 days, completely homeless and just consistently drunk. And they helped me with this lady who was actually in a walker to go to her house, clean up. She gave me one of her husband's shirts, pair of pants, let me get a shower, open up the liquor cabinet. I was able to get whatever I wanted. Sadly, there was no vodka the first day. But they kept bringing me to these meetings, which at the time were super annoying, but they just said, sit down and shut up. And there was a guy named Doc, and every single time he'd see me, he's like, are you going to die in here today? That's what he used to ask me. And finally, a couple of days went by. They finally were trying to get me into a treatment center of some kind. I knew that I was at the end. I had been kicked out of all of the treatment centers in the area. I had been kicked out of most of the treatment centers within a driving distance. Uh, don't go to a treatment center and knock out the biggest guy. You may get out fastest, but if you do need help, they don't let you back, especially some of those places 6 or 7 times. And luckily, I just fell into the right spot at the right time. And finally got to go to the hospital. And the doctor told me literally, he's like, if you can quit drinking today, you may be able to survive 5 to 8 months. I was diagnosed stage 4 cirrhosis. That's terminal. They gave me an expiration date, and they couldn't find anything to do with me. So the guy at the local homeless shelter, who was found out later as a member, made a deal. He says, we have a program here for people that are going through this Christian thing. He goes, we don't want you to be a part of it, but I've got an extra bed. You can stay there as long as you do two things: find a sponsor and do what he says, and keep going to meetings. And I was like, easy enough, right? So I go to the group and I'm like, well, who's gonna sponsor me? And Doc sits there and he's like, he goes, we've been talking about you already. So we kind of got this idea. So you got those three guys over there. Choose one of those guys to be your sponsor. And I remember this ugly jock looking dude, this football player looking guy. And then there's this guy over in the corner with a pair of sunglasses, his pants being held up with a pair of handcuffs, leather jacket, long curly hair. He looked like Keith Richards on a bad day. And I'm like, yeah, that guy, definitely. Worst, best mistake I ever made in my life. What I did not realize was that when he got sober the first time, he was sent by a train when he was 19 years old to go get sobered in this Akron group that nobody had ever heard of. And he literally got off the train drunk as hell, walked up and saw Dr. Bob Smith, proctologist. And he was like, that's where he got sober at. So he did go back out, but luckily I was able to find him in Casper, Wyoming. And yeah, the guy was just, I thought he was going to teach me how to drink responsibly. I thought he'd be able to teach me how to do this shit without getting in trouble. I thought he'd teach me how to do this shit without anything. And instead, he insisted that we had to read this damn book and write stuff all the time. Right. And he made me go out and find a dictionary, and I had to look these words up, even words I thought I knew. Right. Like the and. He made me look up and. And the reason why is because when I came into this program, I thought I was educated. At the time I started going through these steps with this man who, by the way, did not have a formal education. I had a master's degree and 2 associate's degrees before I graduated from high school. I got the master's degree after, of course, but I graduated with honors. I was intelligent. And they hand me this blue book, and he's going through it. He gets to this spot and it's like, oh, well, we can't, control and enjoy our drinking. He's like, what does that mean to you? And I told him he's like, no, we got to look up the word and. It's a conjunction. And I'm like, I know the word and. And we had to look this up. And what it comes out is my idea of what control and enjoy my drinking is nothing what the fucking program means, right? What it turns out is, and he was right, I was wrong that one time. There's probably a couple of times he was, but when I was trying to control my drinking, right, I didn't enjoy myself. I had to do a thing where I was going to go to meet my fiance's family. And she's like, you can't overdo it. I'm like, okay, so you mean pint? And she's like, try maybe 1 shot or 2. So I got 2 shot bottles in my pocket to meet her family. And after those 2 shot bottles are gone, I'm out. I want to go home. I'm not enjoying myself. I'm having the worst day of my life. And all I want to do is go home. And that was the way my entire drinking career was. But give me the chance to enjoy my drinking, right? I'm going to go have 2 drinks with my friends on a Friday night, knowing that we have $1 million contract that I have to start Monday morning. But I'm only going to have 2 drinks on Friday night with my friends. Wednesday, I'm calling in late for work from Vegas, not knowing how I got there. Because if I'm enjoying my drinking, I can't control it. If I'm controlling it, I'm miserable, discontent, irritable. And these are things that an uneducated man with long hair in his 60s had to explain to me by looking up the word and in the dictionary. This amazing thing happened. So I was able to figure out, because when I came into this program, I wasn't an alcoholic, I wasn't a thief, right? And what I found out through the work in the program and working the steps is I stole from everybody. I didn't just put a gun to a drug dealer's head, you know? I used to like put in sheets where I did all this work, working on these projects, and my boss would pay me, and he didn't care much, but the truth is I was stealing from him, and I thought I was an honest person. I have checkbook honesty, you know, I would always make sure that my bills were paid on time until I had no money. But it's absolutely amazing that I was able to get to that comprehension, the fact that I have a disease, you know? Um, so working through the steps with him, I was on my, I was writing out these steps because he made me write these like 15-minute messages if I was to present him. He explained it to me later. When he first came into the program, they made him write a 15-minute speech that he had to present to the group in order to prove that he was an alcoholic. And that's what he had to do. Right. And and he would have to read that in front of this group and they would vote him in or out. That's the way they did it back then. Remember, of the 84 people, 86 people that were in the original Alcoholics Anonymous group when the big book was written, they had almost a 50% lifetime recovery rate. Some things have changed, mostly the judge that sent me here 43 times before I finally fucking got the message. But there's a lot said to that. So he used to make me do things the same way he learned how to do it. And one of those was writing this 15-minute speech about my first step, and same thing about my second step, and the same thing about my third step. So when I first had to speak in an AA function, we had went and I had got into service really early. First off, when I did finally quit drinking a month later, I was already working my third step with my sponsor. My first day of complete sobriety, which I just wrote on the board, is 2/12. I had a DT seizure. I left the meeting on a defibrillator, left a giant shit stain on the floor. Not even, there's no polite way to say it. It's still there. I saw it like 4 years ago. No joke. The liquor cabinet's gone. My fecal matter is still there. Really bad, but I left on a defibrillator. DT seizures are horrible. And about 7 days later, I had my second one. Now, my second one landed me in the hospital. I had repetitive cardiac arrest, which apparently, according to the doctor, I died a few times. And the doctor doesn't know how I made it. I was 130 pounds, which is significantly underweight. My skin was bright yellow. My eyeballs were yellow. And all I had was a little bit of gray under my eyes, and my eyes were inset in my head like I had no brain and they were pushed back. That's the way I was when I came into this program. When I left the hospital, I got my 30-day coin in the hospital bed, thank God, because I don't think I could have made it. And I came out of the hospital. I had chemically induced arthritis, which, so I was like this. I couldn't move a lot of my joints all the way forward. And I had to deal with that, a lot of pain and discomfort when you try to walk that way. And I ended up at 28 years old in a walker for quite a while. Now, skip forward, I'm about 6 months clean, and a guy comes up and asks me to sponsor him because apparently I knew something he didn't know about being sober, and I told him no. And my sponsor had this really cool habit of smacking me about the top of my head, and my glasses would pop off. And as soon as he did that, I knew that whatever I just said, I had to say the opposite. So I agreed to sponsor this guy, and I turned around to my sponsor and I'm like, "What the fuck can I offer this guy?" And he goes, he came back in after seeing you have a seizure on the fucking floor, and now he just wants to know how come you're not dead. And I'm like, okay, fine. And we started working together. He gets a coin 6 months after mine, almost to the day, which is amazing. And a couple months later, of course, yeah, like I said, he got me into service. So one of the first things I did is I went to a meeting, and I remember this guy coming in, and he comes into the meeting and he's like, "I'm your GSR. Just went to the DSM," and he's doing all this alphabet soup. And I'm thinking, everyone's paying attention to this guy. He's cool. I'm taking his fucking job. Right. Because I definitely was smarter than him. Right. And that was my thing. So I went in and I went to that meeting religiously. And finally they're like, great, we do need a new GSR. Here's the key. You have to be here every single week on this day and every single week on this day. And you got to have the coffee made. And I'm like, no, no, no. What was this reporting the guy was doing? No, that's the other part of your responsibility. So, my first job was actually ashtray cleaner. So it was a hell of a raise to be given a key. And I remember getting to that meeting every single day, every single week, the exact days I was supposed to, the exact times I did. And my sponsor was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, we got to do this DSM thing." And I'm like, "Oh, cool! Then I got to figure out what the alphabet soup is all about, right?" So we go down, we go to the thing in Wyoming, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is cool. I'm a GSR. I'm special, right? And we go in there, and basically a bunch of people are arguing about stuff in a circle. And then he tells me, we got to go to this meeting, right? And we're going to go listen to a couple speakers. And I'm like, cool. And he goes, and we're going to do a workshop. And I'm like, do a workshop. And he goes, yeah, you remember your first 3 steps that you had written down? And we went through and reworked those together. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, you're reading it. So at a convention or a state convention, I'd go up and read my first 3 steps in order to explain how I came to realize and get through that. I threw my walker at him. He didn't appreciate that. And everybody laughed at me while I waited for him to bring it back to me so I could get off the damn stage. A couple of years later, I had moved up here and he invited me to go to Dublin, Ireland with him, which was a real trip. I had actually moved up here when I got 18 years sober. I had nothing tying me to Casper. I had just landed there on a drunk. And when I was 18 months sober, he was like, I was only walking around in a cane, which I was really appreciative at that time. And he's like, you need to go try to find your family because you've got to be able to finish your 9th step unless you can actually get in touch with some people that know you. And I was like, cool, hiding here isn't probably doing good. So I came up here, did reconnect with my family, spent a little time with mom, ended up in the monastery in the valley because I didn't have a place to live and was not really workable. I couldn't get a job yet. And stayed there for a little while, then refound my family and was able to stay at my parents' house. When I could finally walk, my first task was trying to make it to meetings. So I used to walk from Willoughby Lane to Hamilton, which, if you guys know the valley, that's Bell Crossing to Hamilton every day at noon to see old plumber Bob. Um, and I did that for a while and I realized, maybe I should be getting a car. And I remember the first time I tried to drive sober, I really couldn't do it. One thing that I didn't know when I was intoxicated, when you get on the road, there's other drivers. And they scared the fuck out of me. So it took me a while to actually get a car and start driving. I reconnected with my daughter. I reconnected with a lot of my family and worked through a lot of my 9th step within the family. I did have one problem. I did actually go through a stage in my sobriety where I became the Yabba, and I had a sponsor here, Mr. Tom, and he didn't make it so apparent that my nickname was Yabba, but he really argued about that. And then when I was in Hamilton, I got a really good sponsor down there, and he actually started calling me Yabba. Um, so I did end up moving because I needed something better. I'm more of a city guy. So I moved to Spokane and got in touch there and really plugged in for quite a while. My sponsor there finally explained to me is that, you work steps with one sponsor, you go into a new place, you get a new sponsor, you work steps with a new sponsor. And I decided to listen to him because I was going through a bunch of fucking head shit, which is really hard to explain. But me getting sober, me getting clean, me staying abstinent from alcohol, I still had some shitty thinking that I had to work on, even working through a good, thorough 9th step. So I worked through the steps again with this man in Spokane and opened up to a lot of opportunities. I ended up working with vets at the VA for a little while. I got into a few of the PTSD related treatment centers, dealing with some of my other problems that I had, mostly because I've been plagued with nightmares most of my life, which are horrific, but I haven't had a big problem with them for quite a while. Yeah, and I haven't been to, I quit going to meetings about 3 years ago. And this is probably I mean, I would consider myself a good AA for quite a while. Done the service. I went to 2 conventions. I even spoke in Dublin, for crying out loud. That's a big thing, being able to be invited to speak. I spoke on the circuit for a while, which I don't have much after doing it. I don't have as much respect for circuit speakers. But I went through a few years back. I went through some stuff. I have my home group in Spokane. We lost 40 members in a year. One of them was a extremely close girlfriend that I had dated. She went back out. I broke up with her. She came back in and out of the program, and I told her, Ed, I do care about you. I have a lot of feelings for you. In fact, I think about you 90% of my time. But if you can get a year clean, we can work things out and try to work this out, because I still care about you, but I can't be involved with you when you're, you know, slipping meth into people's coffee at the meeting and shit, and it's just something that we had to deal with. And she OD'd on the day of her 1 year anniversary, which was also New Year's Day. And I owned a cab service, and it was my cab company that got called to pick up her friend from the scene. So, and we were supposed to meet up that night at midnight. And this was just a couple hours before that. Right after that, gentleman who I got clean with in Casper, who had also moved to Spokane, and we didn't quite mesh well for a long time. Turned out to be, he's 1 year cleaner, 1 year, he got a 20-year clean, and therefore I never got my 20-year clean. He passed away of cancer, and really weird. In this program, we will find people we don't like, because we're really, really good at one thing. We're really good at taking other people's inventory, especially if they have the same habits, traits, and character defects that we have. Monty and I will say his name in respect, Monty and I had real similar character defects. And we were really good at taking each other's meeting, really good at taking each other's inventory. And we were really good at getting into arguments about that before and after meetings, sometimes during meetings. And this carried on for years. About a decade into our feud, our sponsors decided, you two are disruptive. So what we're going to do is this. I'm into American Indian culture. My sponsor's like, oh, I know an Indian guy that wants you to go to a sweat all the way down in Sundance. Right. And I'm like, oh, wow, that sounds killer. And he was already going. Our sponsors had planned for us to go on this spiritual experience together in order to kind of break the ice. And somehow it worked. Him and I, we were able to sit down. Now, we didn't become friends right away, but after about, when I got my 15-year coin, so when he got his 16-year coin, we used to spend 2 or 3 hours after every meeting hanging out with newcomers, going out for coffee, playing cards, Cards Against Humanity, all sorts of other stuff. We became inseparably close. And yeah, and he did some things in the program I've never been able to successfully do. He met a very decent woman who had worked steps, very solid member of AA. He, of course, was more of a solid member of NA. They got married, they had a kid, and fucking cancer got him. He's one of the few people besides my sponsor who also passed away a year and a half before, that I went to a funeral in this program. There's been so many times I've been invited to funerals, I just don't go because, I mean, go be it. The guy that picked me up in the car that day and took me to my first main meeting, killed himself and 3 people because he was drunk driving. He couldn't find what it took. And, it's the amazing thing is the fact that I should have been dead. There's no reason why I should be alive right now. When a doctor tells you you have 5 to 8 months left to live, the only reason why I quit drinking 2 months later, almost 3, was because I was trying to get my affairs in order. That was it. And all of a sudden, I'm living past that point, and to be able to say that I now have a job, I support myself, and I'm not working these fancy, multi-million dollar jobs anymore. I don't have the knack for it, but I take care of people. My job that I have now is more fulfilling than anything I did before. I've sponsored a few people in my life, maybe about 200, but and I've lost sponsees in this program too, which is one of the most horrific things a sponsor can go through. So I did step away for about 3 years. First year was just because I had to deal with so much pain. I didn't want to bring to meetings. I really didn't feel I had anything to offer. Then I got deathly ill. I have diverticulitis, which is probably what's going to kill me, but it didn't last year. So I ended up 28 days in St. Pat's, touch and go. They didn't know if I was going to make it. And um, living with my brother, my parents, back and forth, and which I wouldn't have had without this program. And in and out of the hospital, I didn't go to a lot of meetings. I wasn't feeling too well. And the last year, as soon as my health improved, I went back to work. Alcoholics, we have a problem with overworking. I was working up to 86 hours a week. 3 months after being told you may be dying from this. So literally it's kind of an issue. I have to work with my new sponsor, but I decided literally I made a decision in November, starting the first year. I'm going to get plugged back in, go to meetings regularly, not step away from again, get a sponsor, work on the steps. I'm currently working on step 2 with my sponsor while going through the step 3 stuff to get ready for that. And that's just since the first. I get my next coin in 10 days. And there's been so many of these coins that I've got that I really shouldn't get. The next one is going to be another one. I don't know. God has some kind of thing for me. I guess the only other thing, I got just a couple more minutes. So before I came in here, I'm a typical alcoholic with a kind of extraordinary story. Is I hated Christians when I came in here. I used to practice magic because I wanted to control my environment. And when that failed for me, I gave up on anything. I didn't think any kind of God would be here. And when I came into this program, my sponsor, I was really hated the God thing. In fact, part of the reason why I didn't come to AA with all of the times the judge sent me over here was because I hated the God thing. I hated Christians. They were the most hypocritical, evil people I had ever met in my life. I had met people at Anton LaVey's church, Black Church in California, that were better people in generality than any Christian I had ever met. But the thing is I always limited myself by the people that I had met, the people I had seen, the people I had judged from what I had seen. When I came into this group, when I came into these meetings this time, my sponsor said, it doesn't matter what the word that you see on that piece of paper is, because as you've been around a while and you're able to develop this connection with the creator or whatever you want to call it, that word means less and less. So I said these prayers. I believed in this God that I didn't really understand and I didn't like. And I remember he used to tell me to what's kept me sober is the two things that he made me do starting day one, even when I was still drinking. Is like every morning I get up, before I even get out of bed, the very first thing I do is I run through that Saint Assisi's prayer in my head. And I think about each one of those pieces, daily prayer and meditation. And that's the ultimate meditation, because if you think on every one of those, you're literally thinking about everything in all of our literature is telling you to look for. And then I get out of bed and thank God that I'm alive. He usually deals me a hand of cards for my fate of the day. And it's like, I'm usually like 3 cards short of a hand or 2. And usually they're cards I don't want. A man in this program once explained that to me and handed me this right here. And he was like, this is the one God keeps giving me. It's the one you throw away. And since I met him at a meeting, I've kept that in my wallet ever since, because it's true. And that's what God does. Is sometimes he just hands you, the joker you're supposed to throw away in a deuce and says, you're lucky you're in the game. Just deal with the hand you're down and go. And that's what I do is I get up and I just go. And I pray God that I can help anybody that I can come across that might need my help. That's the only thing I can do. And when I go to bed, I think about what I did the day. If I did something wrong, I need to apologize to someone. That does get me in trouble at work a lot because a lot of times I'll do things that they don't really care if I did, but it bugs me because I'm the one that has to deal with that. I'm the one that has to face that creator. So when I came in here, the very first time I prayed, my sponsor said, get on your knees and pray. And I was like, dude, if God exists, he's been looking for me for a while. And as soon as I tell him where I'm at, he's going to strike me down with lightning. And the thing is that isn't really a joke. I really believe that. You know, I really believe that if God exists, he fucking hated me. And I did it. The next day, he's like, I don't see any burns on you. I was like, well, I guess I was wrong. So I'm supposed to quit at 5 or yeah, right now. Oh, otherwise I had one other thing I was going to say is that, you know, I've been around here for a little bit. I've met a lot of people, and I love pretty much every one of you. So I'm always up to talk about anything. I'm pretty good with the history too. I had a sponsor that was there, so he beat a lot of that stuff into my head. And, you know, the truth is I've been drunk and I've been sober, and sober's a hell of a lot better. With that, I'll just take another 24 hours because that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Before closing, let us remember